I'm Jeff Sankpil, Chief Technologist at KeyCode Media, and we're going to be getting into marketing agencies and how to have a winning strategy with video. So first of all, introductions, and since I'm horrible at introducing other people, I just have it do it for me. So Brian, tell us a little about you.
Well, hello, Brian Travalik from beautiful Cleveland, Ohio. I'm the Senior Video Production and Studio Manager of Singleton Partners and S&P Work Lab. It is a creative studio that was originally built with the creator in mind for a shared workspace up in the front of the house and into the studio, which is in the back of the house, that was geared towards that. And we did the build and install with John here a month before COVID hit. So yeah, we put all brand new facility, brand new things of the Ross Carbonite, Sony PTZ cameras, just for that to get built to say, congratulations on building this, you can't come to work.
I hate it when that happens. John, tell us a little about you.
John Rutherford, Senior Solution Architect with KeyCode Media here in Detroit. Work with our account manager, Lisa Jackson, and our project engineer, Kelly Gottesman. And as Brian so graciously said, we had the opportunity to work with him on this great project and look forward to sharing the details with you all on this session.
Sounds good. So tell us a little bit about Singleton Partners.
Well, Singleton Partners is a multicultural marketing agency. And we do a lot of work, agency of record for the Ohio Department of Health, the Ohio Department of Insurance. So we do a lot of their training marketing videos. And so Renee Singleton, our awesome CEO and president, had a vision to create the Work Lab and to have a place in Cleveland where content can be created. We even have the hashtag content the new currency. So it was her vision to put this 7,000 square foot facility together. And I started actually just as a video guy to do principal photography of the actual build of the gutted facility. And a couple months into that project, when it got a little bit more involved, they asked if what the video gear that's going to be part of it and more of that kind of stuff. And Renee saw the vision that it's not just going to be a recording studio. You know, there's a cyc wall getting put in, there's a color source light grid, the entire size of the studio, that she really, in a sense, needed somebody to run it. And a conversation was had and over some burritos and worked my way into this awesome position now. And then the vetting process started. So I stopped legitimately producing video for almost a year because of now we need to start a studio from scratch. So it was just countless of phone calls and emails and meetings upon meetings upon meetings to the point of, are we hanging 3-inch pipe in the ceiling? Or are we just going to go with J-hooks? So it was a really fun process. And the evolution of our work lab and our studio was to have a recording studio as well. And the recording studio also integrates with the video side of it as well. So we went through and vetted a whole bunch of different vendors and came up with KeyCode became a great partner for us because they understood Renee's vision a lot more clear than some of the other vendors that we actually went through and vetted. So when we talked with John, and to be able to get an analog audio board to play well with digital video, it was a great partnership between KeyCode to actually figure out how do we integrate audio and video together. And it happened, didn't it?
It did. Yes, it did.
So John, on our side of the project with KeyCode, what things did you have to take into account when you were planning this out for them?
Sure. So, the first thing I want to touch on is, to Brian's point, Renee Singleton had the vision. And more importantly, she wanted to do it right. And she understood what she didn't understand, I can say it that way.
Know what you don't know.
Yeah. She knew what she didn't know. And as Brian said, we worked really hard at the beginning to build that trust and build that relationship so that we could all have this open conversation of what would be the best solutions for the specific needs and requirements that they had. One of which, of course, to your point, was the existing analog audio system, which is an amazing setup, by the way, but it was not designed or engineered to play with video, and we were able to integrate that by basically just taking a MADI output from that board and feeding it into the system, into the video system through an AJA frame sync to have that audio as part of the environment. That has now even expanded further. We've done some fine tuning on that, but it's there's hard trigger points that you have to be aware of when you're designing and engineering a system like this. You know, obviously endpoints and central infrastructure components, but we always approach these types of projects with the idea that we don't want to create a closed environment. We want to leave some room for expansion and growth because things evolve, new pieces of equipment come in, and to that point, was it 21 when you wanted to do those conference rooms?
Yes. Yeah. We
Yeah.
went
So
in.
again, everyone was doing virtual conferencing during COVID, and Brian contacted me and said, "Look, we're trying to bring Zoom meetings and integrate into the existing system. How do we do that?" And we were able to do that pretty quickly and cost effectively because the architecture of the system in general was as open as we could possibly make it, so that they can continue to grow and expand without having to do forklift changes. The fact that it was a completely almost empty building at the time, again, made basic cable runs and things like that much easier than they would have been if it was an established building. Getting all the pieces and parts in place, getting all the interoperability together. Part of what was included in this overall design was a shared storage system, so that as the content was being recorded from the studio, it could immediately be put on shared storage for their editorial staff to be able to work on that content and fine-tune it. So we looked at all the individual specific needs and requirements and looked at how we could tie those all together in a more cohesive way.
A holistic approach.
It did make it easier for me because at the end of all the meetings and that, it was by the time that we were done with Key Code, it was, here's the keys. Now you are here to run it. My background for the majority of it has been in straight production, training, sales, marketing, videos, and such, where I did have the background of switching and that during 20-some years of my career where we've kind of done everything. But at this point, and with this company, now I'm wearing every single hat. All right, so when we were able to switch multi-camera, and then with what we ended up doing, especially because of the pandemic, when we're doing these live conferences, we're bringing in 4 or 5 different feeds from all over the country, which before this it was all satellite. The only way that we got them in there was to do that. But working together and actually figuring out how we can do that, we took 4 separate inputs to bring into the switcher. So then I had 3 PTZ cameras in the studio, and then we were able to far side 4 additional feeds via Microsoft Teams. And so that where we ended up changing from being a content creation hub. Well, with pandemic, what can't we do? We can't have people in the building, and they can't be together. So where we ended up changing that mindset was to bring in virtual concerts. So we started doing a lot of that streaming, which really came into play. So what we were originally trying to do as far as the music videos and production side of it changed because we had to change with that need of what everybody needs. So a lot of virtual concerts that we did in the studio, and then webinars, which were really, great for us. And to be able to bring in, those Zoom meetings into the switcher and have control of them was a game changer for us as a marketing agency.
Yeah, and to kind of extend on that, as part of that kind of phase 2, I guess I would say, of the project, we also incorporated a converter box that would take the output from the Carbonite, from their switcher, and feed that directly into a current Zoom meeting. So if they had someone in studio that was presenting or part of the meeting, their studio camera feeds coming through the switcher was also in the meeting. And so, to Brian's point, being able to switch seamlessly between those different speakers or members of the meeting just became an extension of a normal production environment. Instead of switching between discrete camera feeds, they're switching between remote feeds. And it became very seamless at that point. We took everything down from the laptops that were running those sessions through converters to SDI baseband, fed those into the Ross Ultrix router, and then it was just normal production.
Normal production. Yes.
Normal.
It really became a lot easier to go. And to be able to do what we did in a very short amount of time has been really, really cool.
So there was the initial plan to do the pivot to video, to add that on, the vision that you were talking about. What was the original ideas, how much content would be flowing? What percentage of the business was planned to be there? Because it sounds like after you had everything in the right place at the right time, COVID hit, and it became almost 100% of the business.
That became that's really the hard part, because exactly the time that we built it is exactly when COVID happened. I had my Ross training and the kickoff that they came in to make sure everything was done correctly. That was at the end of February. All right, so John and Brian came in, did the install mid-February. I got the training from Ross end of February, and we know what happened in March. So we literally had to do
What happened in March?
Congratulations, you can't come to work.
Yeah.
It was, so that pivot, the COVID was the pivot, because having the workspace that was really geared for content creators in the Cleveland area. So it's like, okay, we don't have those guys to pull from now. So let's internally. So the internal feed really turned it around. So our pivot went from a space for content creators to, well, it's already ours. Let's use it more for us.
Very cool. So what do you see the evolving challenges to be, let's call it the next 3 to 5 years?
Which crystal ball do you want to shake to figure that one out? Hopefully.
Do you think you'll get back to the original plan?
I think the original plan is on the works. We're starting to get a little bit more content creation happening back into the building again. People are utilizing the space a lot more for what it was intended to. But at the same time, with what it was intended for, now that they know that we're doing these webinars and have the streaming capabilities, we're also able to add into that. And the way that we've set up, we built for the future. Okay, so currently right now we have 5 PTZ inputs, all right, that are actually going into there. But we are built for more expansion down the road. So if we want to add more cameras into the mix, we have more inputs. And I was just talking to Ross, and I was pretty excited about some of the stuff that they have, you know, with us being a Ross house, some of the integration that they can use between the Evo. So that's a couple things that I missed by not going to Vegas this year.
But there it is at the other
end.
end.
They are right down the street. So a little bit more conversation between that. I think that's those kind of things that help us out. I think it's just where we started with the vision of preparing for the future. And once new things come in, we were able to do that because the infrastructure we already had in place. All right, to add those, what's really, in a sense, if you think about it now, a simple adding 4 laptops into a converter. But a year ago, I think we were all thinking the same thing. How do we do that? You know, is this that we'll take a step back? And
2 years ago, actually, now. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing, having fun. But it was a build for the future, and that's what we did.
And if I can just add on to that for a second, we're kind of circling around COVID a lot here because obviously it was a very disruptive situation for the entire world. Again, COVID hit, their facility pretty much like most places went into lockdown. After a few days, Brian reached out to me and he's like, so I want to edit, but I can't go in the building. And the particular storage system that we put in was an SNS Evo, and SNS had just announced and just released their Nomad software that allowed them to do exactly that. So again, a phone call with their IT contractor to set up a VPN to allow them to get into the network remotely and then be able to actually start working with that content from home was already there. It was a phone call, and then we had that up and running.
The thing for me as the production manager is, especially during the pandemic, we were doing stuff with the Ohio Department of Health. All right, so we were getting voice clips, video clips in that we had to turn around. And the great thing, because of the technology that was set up, especially with that VPN, I was able to go into the Evo, edit off my laptop, and then remote in to my actual workstation downtown, which had a much faster processor and that kind of stuff. So my exports were actually being done downtown on a much faster system than I had at home. And then it was the same thing with the uploads. I was able to save it into the Evo from when I was editing at home, save it into the Evo, remote into the computer downstairs that had over 100 up compared to my snail of a pace of my home up. So we were able to work remotely in a bunch of different ways, and that still kind of holds true because I had to do that this morning before I left to come here. I had to do an upload, and same thing. Now, because of the COVID, I got to have a much faster internet at home, but I still had to go into that server just to upload, and that technology is really awesome.
So has that been able to allow you to expand the availability of staff to do jobs for you, folks who are not necessarily, who would normally be, outside of the geographic range for you to work with?
Most of the stuff in our is strictly on the video side. It's strictly just me. So I'm not sharing, but everybody in the building has access into the Evo. So we actually, because of COVID, here we go again, we had a shared partition just for the content creators, which was now not used, and that's a couple terabytes of just, so we ended up moving some of that around to use internally for all of our marketing agencies. So now everybody in the marketing agency has access into the Evo for their files and the projects that are on their desk, so then they can share back and forth between that remotely, because we're still in an almost a hybrid state of working. So I'm in the office all the time now, but the rest of the marketing agency does still work remotely a couple days a week. So somebody will be in the office one day, the other person will. So they're still doing everything that they can at home via laptop coming into the Evo. So we set that up as well during the can't go in days.
The can't go in days that we all know and love. Has this allowed you also to more easily reach clients that are outside the normal range of folks that you've been doing or plan to do business with?
Everything just still happens the way it did. There's not much changing in the guard that way of them.
Very cool. There was one other question I had floating in the back of my head.
You're ready
While you're looking up for that, I just want to take a minute and give this guy a pat on the back. Brian came, as he said, from a traditional production background. And as part of this project, we had to introduce and create a whole dedicated media network in their environment that was completely separate from their their normal house network for internet and things like that, their business side of their internet or of their network. So as a consequence of that, of course, Brian's had to become somewhat of an IT person.
My title at work is Senior Video Production Studio Manager and the official IT guy. So,
Chief cook and bottle washer.
yeah, that's
and
exactly
there's been a few
it.
times Brian calls me with some questions, and in the process of asking me the question, he already figures out the answer. So it's just that continuing dialogue and collaboration on a kind of behind the scenes, under the hood manner. That again, we really appreciate when we have that kind of interaction, and a point person particularly. We can build these kind of systems all day long. At the end of the day, as you said, we have to turn the keys over. These systems don't belong to us. We're not building them for ourselves. So there has to be someone or someones on site who start to understand the details of how these systems are put together and how they function. To, if nothing else, be that first line of defense for troubleshooting. And that's really helped. It's been a great relationship on that front as well.
Totally, because like I said, when we went through the whole process, we vetted a couple different companies, and we really felt a great partnership when we started talking with Lisa and John. It felt like they understood our vision almost better than we understood our vision. All right, we had it in our heads and what we wanted to do with the integration of audio to video, and they understood what we were really trying to do, and it made that process so much easier. So there was no. I think one of the big things was the conversation between John and the audio person that came out of Nashville. Before some of our other ones, they were butting heads. These two are not going to work together ever. But with this small little understanding and talking with the audio folks out of Nashville, they were able to come up with that MADI system. And it was this small little things that listening to the client really worked for us. And, that partnership. And so over the last couple of years, John and I, we call each other every once in a while just to say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And, we going camping and,
Nice. Well, the funny thing there is the question I was looking up was how do you get information about new technology and processes? And I think that you just answered that, and the answer is John Russell.
John, yeah, just call him.
So let's go with $1 million question.
You have $1 million for me, I'm taking it.
That's the thing. If someone hands you $1 million, what would you do to adapt your facility or add on new gear?
New gear. I would literally just keep. We have the system now in place where I would just add more inputs into the studio because we do have the PTZ cameras in there. I would love to be able to add a couple more camera inputs so then I could have John fly around with a Steadicam, to that input as well. The other John here from our DP from Cleveland. So to be able to have him throw a Steadicam rig into our music video shoots, that additional things, because the color source light grid that's up there is really awesome, phenomenal. I mean, yes, I can really love to go play and throw some more lights up on the grid. But as far as that, it's really, I would like to add just more cameras, to that. But with the $1 million question, because we planned for it, we are in a position to add that minimally because everything's set and ready to go and in place. And that was part of our original vision was to build for expansion because we're brand new. As a company, we've never done this before. So we wanted to start out awesome, professionally slow to work up into that. And, we're very, very happy with everything that we have in place right now. But if we could add more
Muchness.
Much more fun toys.
Well, that's good. It's always good to hear that somebody's kept you ahead of technology. I've heard that tagline somewhere.
Yeah,
Wonder where. So any questions from our folks out in the audience?
I would say break it down and have $1 million budget for someone that has much
Well, I mean, it sounds like you would just add more.
Yeah, so it all depends on starting from the beginning of where your budget is and being upfront and honest with John and Lisa. And I believe from knowing them and working with them for as long as I have now, they're going to hit you with the stuff that you need to succeed. You know, it's not going to be a, huge carbonite. It could be a smaller one. It could be something else, something that would make you, as the end user, what you're comfortable with. So I think that's where you can, start with it that way, because this has shown us now we can do so much more with less compared to when I first got in this business, 3/4 was just dying. So look at now, we're using our phones now and things like that. So whatever is comfortable for you in a conversation with them, that's where that's where it pays off.
And to add to that, the way Lisa and I approach these kind of opportunities, budgets are budgets, and we understand that. And the goal that we have when we interface and start a relationship with customers is to look for the long-term plan, the long-term roadmap. Get whether that overall design can be purchased at once or it has to be broken out. It at least gives you a roadmap so when additional monies become available, you have your shopping list, right? So in some cases, we've got customers that have a one-year cycle on their budget, and this is what I have to spend this year. Great. So here's what you're going to spend on next year and the year after that. And at the end of this process, you will have all the pieces and parts that you need to do what you want to do. So we scale those kind of designs back intelligently. So kind of to Brian's point, it hits your basic needs and requirements, but also, again, leaves room for expansion and growth as financial opportunities allow. Does that answer your question?
Any other questions? Any answers?
I think it's time for you to eat, Jeff.
I'm down with that. Gentlemen, thanks for taking the time to wander down the hall and enlighten us and talk about your experiences. Everybody, thanks for also coming down the hall to hear what we have to say. So a lot of the folks that do this stuff and have the equipment are on the other side of the hallway, along with lunch, among other things. Lunch is on the second floor. You were going to say?
Yeah, this is not my happy place. It's usually behind the camera, or actually like directing and that stuff. So for them to get me up here I kind of believe in what they've done and how they've kind of helped us out through it. So it made it a little bit easier. Plus, and I talked about that personal relationship. John sitting next to me actually kind of like you're here. It's good to see you again, buddy. So thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And there'll be the next panel coming up, education video, which I will not be hosting. I'll be eating lunch. Well, I'll probably be eating lunch in one of those chairs. So come on back for that at 2 o'clock. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.